and welcome back to the Bliss Bean. I've been wanting to do this video for so long because as far as I've seen, it's not something that's super popular in the productivity realm / community, but I'm trying to advocate it because I think it is such a powerful technique and really transforms the way that you look at your time. So what is today's video about? Today we're talking about time tracking, which means tracking exactly what you do and how much time you spend doing it. I personally think there are 5 main reasons why you should consider doing time tracking. Number 1, it'll train you to stop multitasking. So I think we all know by now that multitasking doesn't actually work with time tracking because you're technically only allowed to record one activity at a time, whether it's because you're using an app and you can only select one activity, or you're using your own system like a spreadsheet. You don't want to end up with more than 24 hours in a day because that just messes up your data. So with time tracking, if you're doing it accurately, at least you're literally not allowed to multitask anymore. Another reason is you get much better at estimating your time. Now, as humans, we are absolute trash at estimating time, and that's because of something called the planning fallacy, where we think that things will take less time than they will, and also optimism bias, where we always think that the future will somehow be better than the past. So instead of allowing you to keep tricking yourself like that, time tracking makes it crystal clear how long everything takes, and it can be painful in the beginning to see how slow and inefficient you are at some things, but you just have to view it as a starting point for improving and getting better. A third benefit is that you waste less time. When you're time tracking, you really feel every minute that you're spending doing something not productive or something you know you shouldn't be doing, and so being aware of that makes it harder for those minutes to slip away while you're watching TV or scrolling through your phone or whatever is your vice. Now you might be thinking that this is a downside, that time tracking will make you too controlling over how you spend every minute of your day, but I've personally found that time tracking has even helped me to enjoy my downtime more. Maybe I'll be relaxing and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I've spent so much time relaxing and I have so much stuff that I need to get back to, but then I check my time tracker and I realize it's only been 20 minutes, so I'm like, oh, I'm fine, I have nothing to worry about. So with time tracking, you not only get better at working, but I think you also get better at relaxing. Lastly, if you are a freelancer, you should definitely be tracking your time because time is money, which is not to say that anyone in any other kind of job shouldn't be tracking their time, but when you're freelancing, it's very important for you to know how much of a return you're getting on your time. So for this next part of the video, we're going to talk about how you actually do time tracking. I think there are 5 main challenges to starting time tracking and actually making it a habit, so we're just going to solve all of them. We'll talk about finding the right tool for you, so I'll show you what I use and some other recommendations, how you can make it fit your life, and some examples of ways you might modify this technique, how to set up your categories, because how do you even begin to break down literally everything that you do in your life, how to get used to the habit. I'll give you some tips on that because it definitely feels very weird at first. And lastly, how do you actually make sense of all the data that you collect? So starting off with finding the right tool for you. So I'm a really big advocate for this app called Now Then Pro. Now, obviously, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I'm just a tiny YouTuber, but even though they're not paying me, I could go on for days about how much I love this app. So when I first decided to start doing this almost 2 years ago now, actually, I tried a couple of different tools, and Now Then Pro is by far my favorite. It just made sense to me. It was simple, but it had all of the features I needed. So if you're interested in learning about exactly how that works and how I use it, I have a whole video on that. So convenient, I know. I'm pretty sure there's a free version of the app and a paid version, but it's like $3 to get the pro version, so it's really not bad. There are other apps too, and I tried to do some research for you guys, and it looks like some popular ones are Toggl, Rescue Time, and Clockify. Another method for time tracking is using a spreadsheet. So you can either make your own spreadsheet or find a template online. Usually the way people will do this is they'll segment their day into 10 or 15 minute chunks and then just literally write in what they did during that chunk. Now, I personally think this is just a little too tedious and time consuming, and it's also not very accurate. Theoretically, you could also do this on paper, but it's 2019, so just get an app because you want a system that's going to allow you to actually analyze the data that you collect. And if everything's on paper, you're going to spend more of your life sorting through those papers than you will actually getting other stuff done. So my recommendation is definitely using some sort of app. All right, then moving on to how you're gonna make it fit your lifestyle. So the main way that I modified time tracking to fit my life as a student was that I didn't track my hours while I was at school. And that was just because the time that I spent at school was so unpredictable, if that makes sense. Like, I would be constantly looking for little pockets of time when I could get other things done and not necessarily what we were doing in class. Oops. So during the school year, I would track my time before school, during lunch because I had a whole hour to do whatever I wanted, and then after school. So I think it's just important to remember that you don't necessarily need to be tracking all 24 hours of your day. You want to be tracking whatever you're trying to maximize. So like maybe you don't want to track what you do at work because you feel pretty good about your productivity levels at work, but you want to make the most of the time that you're spending at home. You don't want time tracking to become a tedious chore. You really want to think about when is it actually useful for you to do this and only do it then. I'm gonna skip over the challenge of setting up the categories that you're gonna track because that's gonna be a long section, but for now we're gonna talk about how do you get used to actually time tracking. One thing to keep in mind is you should definitely give yourself some leeway in the beginning. This is not really a very natural thing to do, so it's very likely you're gonna forget all about it in the beginning and just have like empty chunks in your time tracking schedule, and that is totally fine. You just have to take a few days, a few weeks to get used to it. If you suddenly remember you haven't tracked for a few hours, don't worry about it. Don't try and go back and fill everything in. Just start with tracking what you're doing right now and move on from there. Something that'll really help you to remember to time track is pairing time tracking with the Pomodoro technique. These two productivity techniques pair so perfectly. It's like the holy grail of productivity. The Pomodoro technique is where you set a timer to work for 25 minutes, you work with absolutely no distractions, and then you take a 5-minute break, and then you repeat that over and over. And I've mentioned this so many times in my videos, so I'm sorry if you're hearing this for the 100th time, but this is so applicable to time tracking because if you set a 25-minute timer to work on something, that's literally your cue that you should press the button for whatever task you're about to work on. And then when the timer rings and you're about to take a break, you press the button to say that you're taking a break. It just makes it so that you hardly have to think about when you're switching tasks. Finally, you just have to trust that it gets easier. I've been doing this for 2 years and literally I'm so used to it now that I don't time track while I'm on vacation or traveling, but I still have the urge to keep opening the app and switching whatever task I'm working on. Like we'll be sitting down to dinner and I'm like, ooh, I gotta open my app and mark down that I'm about to have dinner now. Moving on to how do you actually analyze all of the data that you collect, because you're gonna collect a crap ton of data. Honestly, I don't even have a set system for like sitting down and analyzing how I spent every single minute of my life. I don't really think it's necessary because I think the main benefit that I gain from time tracking is just this awareness of time that I have. So even though I don't have a set routine for checking up on how I've been spending my time, something I do is for my monthly planning pages in my Artist of Life workbook by Lavendaire, which I absolutely recommend. I will open up my time tracking app and just get the data on what percentages of time I spent on my big categories of tasks, and I'll fill out a little post-it with all that info and just kind of be like, am I happy with these numbers? What do I want to change with these? So like for example, I'm looking at May right now and school was my #1 category for that month because of AP exams. I wasted away 13.5% of my life studying and sitting in those testing centers, as opposed to the 0% of time I normally spent on my schoolwork in second semester of senior year. So it's just kind of interesting to see how your life changes month to month and how your focuses vary. Of course, if you're into it, you can get a lot more into the detailed number crunching, but I think what I do is plenty. So now finally we get to talk about how you actually set up your app for time tracking. I saved this for last because I wanted to show you exactly how I do this, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So figuring out your categories is definitely an ongoing process as you continue to use the system and figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. Just a few weeks ago, I actually sat down and was like, there's a lot of stuff about this that isn't really working for me right now. So I simplified some things, made some more detailed. I also deleted a bunch of old categories that were related to school because that's done, thank God. So right now what I have works perfectly for me, but probably in a few months I'll need to change it up a little bit, and that is totally fine. So as I mentioned, the Pomodoro technique, you take very regular little breaks, and so I have a thing just for tracking those breaks that I take in between my chunks of work time. In my planning category, it's mostly just stuff like weekly and monthly planning, but also sometimes if I'm planning a trip or some sort of event or gathering, if I'm working on doing some gap year planning, or if I'm looking at my budget and stuff, that all goes into the planning category. In my school category, I used to have every single one of my classes listed out, but now it's very simplified. For the routines category, it's my morning, bedtime, and photo organizing routines. For food, I feel like this might be a little excessive, but it only takes one more tap of a button. And then there's also a category for planning, so like if I'm looking for recipes or making a shopping list for a recipe, things like that. My blog category is probably one of my most complicated ones, so I've tried to really flesh out everything that I do. I did make a PDF that you can download by clicking the link in my description, and it includes not only all of the categories that I use, but categories that one might want to use. So that's a really good resource if you're just first setting up your time tracking app. I've got driving, whether it is I that is driving or someone else, just transportation basically. Chores, getting ready. My personal development category literally has one thing, and that's for when I'm updating my resume. I just didn't know where else to put it, basically. For exercise, I do like to keep track of the different kinds of exercise that I do. For my relaxing category, I've broken it up into a few different things. So like whether I'm just by myself or I'm spending time with my family, reading a book. I also like to track phone time separately because while spending time on my phone can be relaxing, it's not the best use of my time and it can kind of suck me in, and so I just kind of want to be aware of how much time I'm spending on that specifically. My wellness category has some more wholesome activities that I want to get into doing more often, like meditation and writing and making art. My social category involves a few different things, so like whether I'm texting a friend or hanging out with them in person. Also includes volunteering and stuff like that, and also the time that I spend like making cards for people and choosing gifts. My photo business category has gotten a lot more complicated. It literally used to be one singular task that just said photo biz, but then I realized that if I want to get serious about this, I should actually figure out how much time I spend planning shoots, taking photos, editing photos. My emails category is for when I'm just like trying to clear out my inbox and not really focusing on anything specific. So like I'm not focusing specifically on answering blog emails. I'm not focusing specifically on photography inquiries. I'm just trying to get my inbox down to zero. Hygiene category, pretty self-explanatory. I've got a learning for category. I've got a category for learning, and I've split up when I'm practicing Korean, Spanish, reading nonfiction books, listening to podcasts, or like watching photography or videography tutorials. I've got an errands category for a couple of random adulting things that one just has to do. I've got a nap category because even though I'm not really a huge fan of taking naps, sometimes it's just a necessity. And then lastly, this money-making category might sound kind of weird, but basically my main source of income is my photography business, but I also do some other stuff, like occasionally I babysit, I work on listing clothes on Poshmark and selling them, and also sometimes I help my parents with their business. So yeah, money-making category. Okay, so that's all the categories that I use. I hope that was useful or at least mildly interesting. As I mentioned, I did take the time to make a very useful PDF for you. The PDF just lists different categories and the subtasks that you might set up within them. Basically, I just wanted to help you if you're just starting out with time tracking because, as I said, setting it up can be the hardest part. So what you can do is you can print out this sheet of paper and like circle or highlight the activities that you do in your life and you think would be useful for you to track. Then you choose your tool, you set it up, and you get time tracking. So yeah, the link to that is in the description. I hope you find it helpful. One last thing before I go though, I did ask on Instagram if you guys have any questions about how I time track, and I think I answered all of them. I hope I answered all of them. But one question that I did really want to emphasize was someone asked, can it feel time wasting to plan your time meticulously? So I can honestly say that with the way that I do time tracking, the way that I use it, it has only made a positive impact on my life. I've never felt like it has been a waste of my time to do this, but it is something to keep in mind, especially if you're starting out. You don't want to make this process so complicated, so detailed, that you're just making it more time and energy consuming than it's worth. After all, productivity techniques should make you more productive, not less productive. And so I hope the stuff I've discussed in this video will help you figure out how to genuinely make time tracking work for you. All right, now I'm done talking. I've literally been talking for over an hour. So I'm gonna go take a much needed break. Next week, I'm very excited for this. I'm making a pack with me video for my Europe trip where I am bringing only a carry-on and a personal item. So we'll see how that goes, but it should be fun. So until then, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week. Bye! Thank you.